If you're a parent caught in the chaos of youth sports, the pressure, the politics, the excitement, you're not alone. This is Be Valiant.
Welcome to another episode of Be Valiant, powered by Valiant Sports Society. I'm your host. I'm the CEO and founder of Valiant Sports Society, the host of Be Valiant. I'm glad you are here today to listen. I hope we have a lot of parents tuning in. I have got another great guest today. This guest, I have to say, was one of the first people in this space that I reached out to and thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with her. What I can tell you about this person, she is a former athlete, sports parent of 3 kids, a coach, so she's been down that road as well. But more importantly, I think not as important of being a parent, by the way, but more importantly to it all, she is a youth sports advocate. She has written a book called Take Back the Game: How Money and Mania Are Ruining Sports Kids and Why It Matters. And I have to tell you, if you are listening to this and you have not heard of this book, if I knew of this book in my journey with my 2 girls, I would have kept this book near my side all the time. It should be the Bible of what is going on in youth sports when you need to understand and make decisions and need to understand on what's going on around you. But more about my guest. My guest is a freelance journalist, researcher, and former cross-country and track coach. She holds a bachelor's degree from Lehigh University and a master's degree from Oxford University and the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. She's a former analyst with the National Security Program at Harvard University, founding board member of the New York City chapter of the Positive Coaching Alliance, served on the Aspen Institute's Reimagining School Sports Advisory Group from 2020 to 21. In her work, she investigates how youth sports have evolved under commercialization and intense competition with a focus on mental health, overuse injury risk, equity access, and systematic reform, which are all near and dear to my heart. If you've been listening, please welcome Linda Flanagan. Linda, thank you for being a part of Be Valiant.
Oh, thanks for having me, Todd. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's start. Well, first of all, I want to say this. You know, my first conversation, now we've had a few. I always get fired up to talk to you. I said this in the open. I really wish I had found you when I was going through the whole youth sports thing. As a dad, as hopefully our listeners know, the experiences that I have, I think somewhat parallel your background. Former athlete, played in college. I didn't coach to the extent that you did. I coached on the rec level, quickly got out of that move when I realized what was going on. But I think the advocacy side of what you're trying to do in youth sports, I said this earlier, I'm going to grab onto your coattails and hopefully come for that ride and be a part of your team, because I really believe in the words that you are preaching about what is going on. But let's kind of start with, you know, where this whole journey, you know, for you has come from across all 3: coaching, parenting, and
Sure.
playing.
Okay. Well, thank you again for having me. I'm really happy to be here. I've always enjoyed talking to you too.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's see. Coaching. I started, I was a high school running coach, cross country and track for 19 years. And that I started that when I was, my youngest was in kindergarten and I had 3 kids. So the timing was good that way. It was something like fun for me to do. I also coached, my son, my youngest one, in baseball when he was, you know, like doing little league type stuff. So elementary school. And that was also very interesting to coach boys and to be, you know, in an all male environment, basically. And okay, so that's coaching. Parenting. I have, as I mentioned, 3 children. They're all out of the house now, out of college and launched, more or less.
Good for you. Congratulations.
Right. It's something we all aspire to.
Yeah.
And let's see, my oldest, what was helpful for me in writing the book, I should say, is that only one of my three was really into sports, and he's the youngest. Which incidentally, I just read a book about siblings. It's often the youngest who's the most into sports, the most athletic, because it's an opportunity for them to distinguish themselves, as opposed to usually the oldest is the most academic, and then the youngest tends to be the best athlete. That's just, just factoid I wanted to share. That proved to be true in our family. But it was useful to have a daughter who, she's the oldest, who was like, would go along, but didn't really enjoy the sports stuff very much. And then I had a middle son who was, he was violently opposed to organized sports. Like, do not tell me to do this. I'm not doing this. I do not like this. So, it wasn't going to happen. And then my youngest, who was naturally good at sports and wanted to do it. So that it gave me an interesting perspective on the whole environment. So seeing it as a parent, seeing how it affected me, and it bothered me how much it affected me, how much I cared. And I think, Todd, to your point about, oh, I wish I'd had your book when I was going through it with my kids were younger. That's very kind of you to say. And I would love for that to be true, but I think it is really, really hard when you are in it to have any perspective on the environment and like what's the right way to act here when it all seems so important. So having those three kids really was helpful to see this youth sports world from their perspective. And then again, of course, as a coach, where that's a whole other world, and I saw like the blowback that happens to coaches when you don't do things the way every parent wants you to. And then finally, I guess as an athlete myself, I played softball and tennis while I was growing up, and in high school, I was a varsity player, and then really took up running with gusto. I ran in high school also, not for the school, and then really ran in college and after, and was a competitive runner and every distance from between the mile and the marathon. So that's been my main thing now.
Yeah, that's awesome. By the way, I love in the book the stories you tell about coaching the cross country team and managing the girls. It's great. And the differences of what you saw before and then coming in and the responses that you got from them. So talk a little bit about, dealing with your youngest, and it was basketball, right? Primarily
that was his main. Yeah, he played multi-sports. He was
Okay.
basketball, soccer, and baseball for as long as possible.
Okay, great. And in that process, how much of that were you navigating, you and your husband, around that journey? And, were there
Yes.
pitfalls and things that you guys went through that, maybe caused stress in the household, those types of things?
Yes. Well, I think the toughest thing was, and I know it's a lot more intense now, so I sympathize with the parents who are trying to figure this stuff out, because it's more intense and more inflexible. But when our son was going through like the travel soccer world, at one point, and I can't remember, it was in elementary school, the team insisted that he play fall and spring soccer, which, probably now it's 4 seasons when they're in elementary school. But anyway, my husband and I thankfully were aligned on the fact that, I'm sorry, soccer is a fall sport. He's going to play baseball in the spring. And thanks so much, but he's not going to be playing with the team in the spring. So good luck. And then he continued to play basketball in the winter, and was just, like, he was interested in a lot of sports. He had a lot of friends in different sports. It was like a well-rounded kind of thing. Well, we did that one year, and he had been on the A team, the fancy 4th grade A team in soccer. And after we said, sorry, but he's not going to play, they bumped him to like the C team for the following year. So, and they had the right to do that. It's their program. They could say, well, look, if you're not going to commit, these are the consequences, and that's fine. But it was a little bit of a, it was sort of a harsh reminder. I thought it was, I protested at the time that I think this is crazy. Why do they have soccer in the spring? They don't need to be playing 2 seasons when people are playing baseball. Meanwhile, other kids were also playing lacrosse. So all these sports, like the entire weekend, would be consumed by sports. But we my husband and I, we were like, oh, well, that's the breaks. And he'll play on the C team or the B team, whatever it was. And that was fine. It all turned out just fine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, and by the way, that's what I hope as Be Valiant transpires is I hope to have more conversations from those parents and former youth athletes that have gone through that journey completely. Like, what is the outcome? Because I think parents that are in it today need to understand this is the reality of the outcome. This isn't what you're being told is the outcome. Yes, there are some that do achieve. There are some that play in college. There are some that play 4 years. And yes, there are very, 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 very few that may move on beyond college and play something else. But the reality is these are the stories, and pay attention to them, because this is what you really need to make your decisions around. So,
right.
so
And there's
okay.
there's something liberating in that too. It's like, it's not that big a deal. He played on the B or the C team. Of course, I don't remember. It's not important. It seemed important, but it wasn't important. He did fine. He still loved soccer. He made new friends on these other teams. And, you can just kind of embrace whatever the reality is and say, this is okay. And we'll just move forward from here.
Yeah. What was his main sport, basketball or baseball?
Basketball was his main
So
sport. Yeah.
inside of basketball, does that situation happen? Or if that situation hasn't happened, but yet it does happen in let's just assume it did happen. Do you react the same way, knowing that that's his primary, that's his love, he wants to be on the best team, so on and so forth?
I'm not sure because there's AAU, which is so big,
Yeah.
and is very demanding and year round and all that. And somehow it never became an issue for him. It never was presented as you have to do this, or, you're never gonna amount to anything. And I think also, my husband and I are pretty grounded about like what's important. And we both knew he's not like he was going to go and be some, star basketball player. He's a very good high school basketball player. Three
Yeah.
seasons, varsity player, or 3 years. Great. And that's good enough. That's great. In fact, it's hard to be on the varsity basketball team when it's so small and in a decent sized school. I feel sure that if we had been presented with a demand or an enticement to join AAU, we would have said no, because he wouldn't have wanted to do it either.
Yeah.
Like, he loved basketball, but he could also play in the driveway, and he had friends he could go play with. He didn't want to be overscheduled. We didn't want to be. But I know it is out there, and it is something that is very hard to resist. And I think in other sports, perhaps like baseball, where there's now fall ball, starting at such a young age. I think the parents really feel the pressure to stay up on it in a way that they don't perhaps with basketball.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So his journey ends after high school for basketball?
Well, it's funny because it, and I would say his journey hasn't ended. And this is one thing I love about his youth sports experience, is that he did not play varsity basketball in college. He went to a D1 school. He never would have made that team. He's like 5'11". He doesn't have it. And that's fine, but he played a ton of intramural, a ton of just going to the gym and playing with
Yeah.
friends. And so he still plays basketball.
That's awesome.
And he still plays other sports. And so it hasn't, I guess the journey hasn't ended.
Yeah.
And I think one important stat I wanted to share was the fact that there's some indication that the young people who are most apt to continue playing sports into adulthood are those who played varsity sports in high school. It's not necessarily those who played in college, because they're all beaten up by the time they're done.
Yeah.
But he's not hurt. He's run 3 marathons. He's very, very active. So that to me is a success story. And what is the point, in my view, of youth sports is like to encourage activity, keep it fun. Don't beat them down so that they're, have arthritis in their knees when they're 22, and, allow them to grow into adulthood being active.
Yeah. Well, and there, by the way, there's a lot in there. By the way, parents listening, there's so much here to go in with Linda that we won't even touch. But why I asked you where that he is in the journey, and I was hoping you would say something similar, is that parents need to understand, I think you're a big advocate of this as well, is that club sports in college and intramurals, let's put them all together, but that is like a viable option for your son or daughter when they go to school to go play and wear the name of the school across their chest. Like it's an amazing experience. I played club baseball after I think I was 5 years in. I came in injured to SMU where I finally graduated. They had a club baseball team and I ended up playing on it. And parents do not know, especially when they're in it. They definitely don't know unless they've got a child in college, I think. And I think that story is one that needs to be told because it's an amazing, amazing option for your son or daughter to continue that path and continue the passion of playing. And like you said, once college is over, I mean, there's still adult rec leagues. There's all kinds of things. The real goal is keeping the passion alive.
Right, exactly. And I think in many ways, the club's college sports are about at the level varsity sports used to be. I mean, there can be really pretty intense and serious, and they travel and they're not, it's not like for goof offs or anything. Like club sports in college are a commitment. They're nothing, by the way, like the varsity sports that require, take 30 hours a week of your time.
Yeah.
But they allow for those who are, if you're serious about a sport, to keep playing and to have fun. I mean, isn't that what it's supposed to be about?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, here's one for you. I didn't even share this story with you. It just happened last week. I had Bob Dranoff, ex-commissioner of the East Coast Conference, on last week, and I was telling him in my class at Arizona State, I had a few students who told me one day, they're like, well, we got to leave early. I said, what do you got to leave early for? Well, we got baseball practice. I said, you guys are on the baseball team? They said, no, we're on the club team. So anyway, I kept talking with them, and come to find out that there are probably 60 kids playing club baseball at Arizona State. There is a Division I team in club, and there's a Division II team in club.
Wow.
So, yes, how amazing is that? Like,
that is.
Yeah, I was shocked. And by the way, their gear is incredible. I told them, you got to get me a lid. Their hat was awesome. It was, and they got great stuff. So, okay, so enough about me. How do you go from all these experiences and become this amazing voice advocate for the youth sports space and write this great book? How does this all come together for you?
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you. And by the way, here's my book. I told you I would show
thank
it.
you so much.
The big red cover, so you can't miss it.
Yeah. But by the way, parents, I read the book. I also listened to the book. I have digital copies of the book. I would highly recommend you get digital so it's always in your pocket. So that's why I couldn't show the book. So
that's very kind. Well, I have been a writer my whole life, as well as being a runner and mother and all of that. So, throughout when my children were little, I did projects and freelance writing projects. And I was very struck, especially when I started coaching, I should say, because I had my expectations of it were different from the reality of it. Like I went into it thinking, this is going to be great. I like teenagers. I think they're fun. And I know running really well. I have a lot of experience in it. I'm not crazy. Like I'm not going to run them into the ground. I'm a nice person, and I just learned very quickly that what the expectations of coaches, it was sort of adversarial from the get-go with some parents. I mean, there was those expectations of the coach that it's all about getting into college. And this was even when I started, and I can only imagine the pressure on coaches now. And whereas I thought, oh, I'll be a good role model. I'll care about them, which I did. I really love the girls. And I'll show them how to run and develop this wonderful habit that they can carry with them into adulthood. And it really struck me how different it was from that expectation. And so that experience as a coach, and then on top of that, what I saw and felt as the parent on the sidelines, and feeling this sort of like, clash between like it really bothered me that I cared so much about my son's basketball in particular. Um, and then being on the other side of it as the coach, and like, why do these people care so much? It was kind of like this juxtapositioning of these two contradictory ideas. Um, it made me think about it more. And so I started writing some articles exploring what was going on in youth sports. And um, one thing led to another, and I got a book deal out of it. And then I was able to dive in even deeper into the subjects that really interested me, because I had sort of come to wonder if this is all worthwhile. Like, what are we doing here? And why are we doing this to kids? Making this so intense and crazy. And what are we doing to families? And, again, it has only gotten more intense and more high pressure than it was when I was doing it.
By the way, what year is this unfolding for you? Like when you get the book deal and you're thinking about this?
Well, I've been thinking about it for years, really ever since I started coaching, and I was writing about it and stuff. But I got my book deal in January of 2020.
Wow.
So
Okay.
right before the pandemic, which was made for an interesting writing time. I certainly had a lot of private time during the pandemic. So I did a lot more research and figured out what I wanted to say.
Yeah. Well, and even for your publisher to say, okay, we're going to do this. We're in 2020, just to put this in perspective, this is the end of my youngest journey in 2019. So it butts up right against that. My other one has finished 1 year of playing beach volleyball at JUCO. I think that same year, or maybe 1 year earlier. So you're coming through these. The reason why I'm pointing this out, you're coming through these experiences of where I'm coming through it, and you're telling those stories and then some. I don't want to say it starts and ends there, because you're telling the whole story.
Yeah. So you have a similar kind of perspective on having been through it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and you hit on so many things in that book that were just, for me, were wow. I mean, wow is all I can say. That's why I wish and when I say I wish I had this book, for parents listening, I was crying for information, literally crying for information, trying to find ways that I could help my kids navigate this ecosystem, navigate adversity, navigate injury, concussions, vocal cord dysfunction, which I could not get any information on when this first started to occur to my soccer player. I mean, there was just nothing. And dealing with the coaches, the arrogant coaches, and the arrogant organizations. And, again, I'm been in sports and media and played and all of that stuff, and I'm sitting there perplexed.
Yeah.
And literally, like, where is the roadmap for this? So kudos, because it's amazing. Parents need to grab it. That's for sure.
Well, thank you. And I could say, like, the way the book is organized, it's the first section is on, like, well, how did we get here? How did we, because I was curious about it, because when I grew up, and not to say, oh, back in the good old days, but it was just so different with sports, like it was just something fun you did. I play catch with my dad and my siblings, and my parents would, they wanted us to do well when we played, but it was like they had a lot of other things going on, which I feel that seems appropriate to me, that when you're an adult with a responsible job and 5 children, in my parents' case, like, you're not going to be at the beck and call of your kids.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was very curious about how we got here from the way it was when I grew up to this hyper intense, expensive environment. So I found the first section of the book is the 3 reasons for that change. Briefly, it's money. There's a lot of people making a lot of money off parents and families,
Yeah,
and
too
they
much.
have a vested interest in selling you things. The second is the most interesting to me is the shift in attitudes or perspective on childhood, that beginning in the 70s, there was this big shift. It's a function of smaller families, more divorce,
Yeah.
a lot of anxiety, a lot of economic anxiety, stranger danger. These various factors led to the point where parents felt like they had to engage in intensive parenting or concerted cultivation, as the Annette Lareau says, as sociologist Annette Lareau says at University of Pennsylvania. Concerted cultivation of every particular interest or possible skill your child might have in order to give them every advantage. And that's so the money, the change in attitudes toward children, and then the college prospect and how college has become so important. And it's always been important. I think there's always a status element to it, but the sports angle has gotten more pronounced in the function perhaps of the money. There's $4 billion in scholarships available, which is very tempting, even though it's an illusion. And the admissions advantage that goes to athletes, which is motivating a lot of it. So it's those three. That's the first third. The second third is like, what is the impact of this? How does this change sports? And what are some of the paradoxes? How we think about parents and coaches and character building, physical health, mental health, and community. What is the impact on these important elements of the youth sports scene? And then the third section is about, well, what can we do about it?
Yeah.
Big picture, little picture. So that's it in summary.
Well, and so to touch on a few of them, so when you're talking about, growing up in particular and us becoming parents, I'm older than you, I think, but not our generations are same of where we played, so to speak. And, for me, I probably try to analyze myself too much in all of this from the past, but I was never that parent that was hardcore. I had a dad. I was from a divorced family. I had a dad who ended up moving to Dallas. He wasn't around, so he wasn't going to a lot of my games. My mom was my biggest fan, but she worked, and to your point, she didn't make all the games. And I had the soccer playing daughter on the podcast, and she made a comment to me about, I guess if there was anything I would change, maybe you guys just didn't need to go to as many games. And it never occurred to me.
I love that.
Yeah, right. It was a great line. And it never occurred to me, not because we shouldn't be there and not because it was about, going to watch your kid and be selfish about it. It was because I wanted my daughter to know, like, I'm here for you. And by the way, I was on the sidelines with a camera. I wasn't on the parent sideline. I was quiet, but I was present. And that's what I wanted her to know. And it turns out that, did I overcompensate on that situation? Right? Because when you think about
that's your correction.
Yeah. And I think what you were saying is when we look at our past, the past is actually the right course. We can say, oh, the old days, or however you framed it up. But at the same rate, I'm sorry, but that is the right way, because we were brought up in a way that we did not have all that. Now, by the way, I'm sure you saw it where you grew up. We still had the crazy parents, right? Those,
yes,
they were still there,
of course.
But I don't think it was as pronounced as what we see today. But we were free to move amongst the cabin, I guess is the best way to say it, right? We could go make our decisions. We could go find our sports. We can go play multiple things. We could go to the park and play over the line or basketball or tennis or fill in the blank on whatever you want. We had that freedom to go do whatever we wanted. And now parents are in this place, and this is where it turned for me, was when you talk about the dangling of the third part, I got caught up for a moment on, oh my God, well, if my kid really wants to play in college, then do we really got to do these things? And I made it to college, and I'm thinking, wait, do you really need to do these things? But yet you are so in doubt of the whole situation that you don't know otherwise. And this is why I use fear, and I think I've explained to you, and to the parents listening, that's why I use fear in Be Valiant and in Valiant Sports Society, because I was consumed more by fear of making the wrong decisions, affecting my daughter's mental health, all those things, that it was terrible. It was terrible from that perspective.
Well, I think that, like many parents, and also younger parents of younger kids too, like they're afraid of screwing up. They're afraid of like leaving their child behind. If I don't do this, like so much of, I think my sense is that, and from what I've heard from parents, is that it's not that they're dying to like spend every weekend at, some park in another state. It's that they're so worried that if they don't do it, they're putting their child at a disadvantage. And like they're sending the wrong message to, like, I don't care. And what does it look like? This, like, this, the comparison, part of it, that if I'm not there and the other parents are, or my child, I haven't put my child in, it's fear is a very strong motivator, and fear of missing out is, of course, what everybody says. I don't want to put my child at a disadvantage, so I'm going to grit my teeth and do this when I really would rather not. And by the way, that same fear afflicts many of the kids who are immersed in this universe, because they're playing often, they're not playing to win, they're playing not to lose. And that makes it, because they don't want to screw up either. They don't want to, like, be caught on tape doing something dumb or affect their stats in such a way that it's going to make them look bad. So, young people, many of them, and not all, but many, have this, they operate out of a sense of avoiding losing rather than winning. So there's a certain joylessness to that, I think. By the way, that's how I played tennis. I was not a great tennis player, and I was the first singles on my team because the team stunk, and I lost just about everything, and I was so tentative and timid, and that is not the way, that's not joyful, and it's not the way the best athletes play.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's fast forward a little bit. One of the things I like to talk about, and it just so happened you definitely talk about this, is culture at home.
Yeah.
Right. It really all starts there. And as
Mhm.
I've said many times on the podcast, I do not believe that I set out to actually define, my wife and I, to define what that culture was. I think I thought we had the right culture, and subsequently what that culture is and how that culture ends up marrying up with the organization that you choose to have your kids play at, the coaches you choose to have them play for. Talk about the importance of that in what you see, and defining your culture at home first, and then with your child or children, and then moving that forward.
Well, I mean, I think it's about, like, figuring out what's important to you as a family. What are your values? And for some families, and I see them all over the place, every child plays the same sport, like lacrosse or golf or skiing. And that's their family value. That's what they care about. And that's okay. So that's what they're going to do. I don't know that that's true for most families, though. And yeah, I think I allude to it in the book a little bit. I think probably most parents, I think the most common thing parents want for their kids is that they grow up and be responsible. Want them to be like responsible adults who can fend for themselves, make a living, maybe have a partner, maybe have children, but at least be like a self-sufficient adult, and um, and a responsible adult. So if you start from that premise, then how do you conduct yourselves as parents to get that out of them, or to encourage those values? And I think I've believed that some of the demands of the youth sports system undermine those things. They undermine, in particular, ironically, um, the sense of responsibility, because you may be responsible to your team, but I'm sure all of us who've had kids in sports know that feeling of, like, okay, you got to get up. There's no time for you to make your bed. There's no time for you to, take the trash out. There's no time for you to do any responsibilities around the house for the family, for your siblings, to visit your grandmother,
Yeah.
because you got to get to the game. And I think that's what was one of those contradictions that bothered me about the intensity of youth sports. And I think if you can know what your values are as parents or as a family, and then are, like, consciously try to, conduct yourself in accordance with those values, you're more apt to get what you want. And at the same time, it's very easy to get swept up in the culture of more, more, more.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's really answering your question. I think that, but it is all about what's important to you, and holding on to that. I think one of my recommendations to parents is to keep your family close,
Yeah.
because there's these forces pulling you away, pulling you apart, all this divide and conquer stuff. I mean, you're the father goes one way, the mother goes another, and maybe they meet up at the end of the weekend. And that's, the younger that starts, the more disconnected your family's going to be.
Yeah.
And I think you can kind of find yourself, you end up in this position where this isn't really what I wanted.
Yeah, and I think you were kind of touching on it, as a parent for me, when, I guess if there was an attitude, not so much a culture, it was let the girls deal with their situations. I'm not jumping in their situation. Their mom's not jumping into unless this is like 5, 6 years old. But I'm talking that I don't even know of where I started this. It was still too young. And so I would often tell my kids, hey, you got to go talk to the coach. You got to go talk to such and such. This is your deal. Like, you got to learn how to do this. This is life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, there are some moments in that time where I had them go do that. And I wonder, like, did I go too far to the other side, right? Like,
by making them sort of advocate for themselves?
Well, no, even beyond that, like there's a point of advocating and there's a point of protection, right? There's like this, there's this really fine line. And did I not go to the side enough to protect and let them go advocate? Look, I still think it's all a good learning experience, but sometimes I struggle with the fact that our thing was, hey, it's your thing. I mean, that's how I grew up. If I had a problem, then I can tell you going back to 8, 9, 10 years old, I had problems with coaches, especially the ones that were coach parents that, took that whole thing to another level, and I would challenge them. But, anyway, so it was.
Well, I think that I commend that, by the way. I think encouraging your kids to speak up to the coach and express their wishes, not just to go along, but to also say, I want to do XYZ. I really want to try this position, or I want to run this distance, or whatever, like to learn to advocate for themselves. At the same time, in my view, I've often said that there's a contradiction with parents about that they intervene when they shouldn't, and they butt out, they stay removed when they shouldn't. So they intervene and raise hell with the coach when there's an issue with playing time or position, or she wasn't picked for varsity, or why didn't she get more playing time?
Yeah.
That's when they butt in.
Yeah.
But they will stand back and say, everything's fine. Even if as long as the team is winning and the child is, performing well. But meanwhile, there's kind of nasty stuff going on.
Yeah.
Like in my view, that's when you as a parent, you don't want them to have to advocate. You go in and say, that's when you raise issues with the coach or the athletic director, but not about this performance, the playing time, position, all of that. That's ultimately not that important. It is important if there's bullying, abuse, hazing, that sort of thing. And I just have seen too many people look the other way when the coach has got a great record.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I think I'm a victim of that. With soccer player daughter was playing and was on a team. And again, I told her, she was going to have to go kind of manage the situation. And it finally got to a point where I said, look, you got to look to play somewhere else. We can't, this isn't really her decision at this point. And I'm talking, she's not in high school. This is a parent decision. I mean, this is failure on my part and my wife's, I guess. And my wife probably was already on the page of like, let's get her out of there. But I fought it. It was one of the best teams, blah, blah, blah. And when I did talk to her, my daughter, she absolutely freaked out on me. Like, I have negotiated, I've said this before, I've negotiated multi-million-dollar sports television rights, and I could not negotiate my daughter off of this club competitive team. I could not do it. And part of the reason was she did not want to leave her friends. And that was another thing that you talk a lot about in the book that I did not understand as a girl dad early on. I figured it out pretty quick, that girls just are playing for different reasons than guys are playing for. And that was eye-opening to me. And I could not negotiate this kid off of the team. By the way, she finally did leave. Things moved on. They got good, but amazing. It was amazing.
Yeah. So it was a bad coaching situation.
Yeah, it was bad.
But she loved her teammates.
She loved her teammates. Yeah.
Yeah.
She loved her teammates.
Well, at least there was that redeeming quality. you know, because that can go a long way. And if there wasn't actual, physical abuse or God forbid any sexual abuse or anything
Yeah,
like
it wasn't
that,
that. No, it wasn't that.
it's just, I mean, I don't think you did the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Personally, sounds like she got something out of it that was valuable to her and didn't get hurt in the process.
Yeah. Well, and look, I think, again, this is a place, do we enter in multi-sport? At this point, she's not playing multi-sport. If she's playing multi-sport, she's in soccer, she's out of soccer, she moves on to the next sport. She never played basketball, and she grew to be 5'11". We had a basketball hoop in the front yard, and it's a shame she never tried.
Yeah.
But these are the kinds of things when we look back, especially for me, when I look back on my experience and the, I guess, overall success, I guess, to a degree, is that you kind of made your way through all of this stuff and you finally ended up on the path of where the greatest passion, the greatest love, the greatest moments were happening. Probably the best coaches were affecting you. And this is what gets lost by, I'm shifting gears on you a little bit, but this is what now gets lost because kids are not playing multi-sport year-round. In the warm weather states like Arizona, where I'm at, forget about it. Baseball players, 12 months out of the year. Soccer players, 11 months out of the year. Like if it's outside, you're playing year-round, and the clubs are dangling that carrot that if you don't, you're not gonna go on to college and play, which is, as we know, complete BS.
Well, I mean, that's just sort of like malpractice. It's sports malpractice. It really is because I mean, there's so much data, there's so much evidence that shows that multi-sport athletes do better, they have more longevity, they enjoy the sport so much more. Whatever one they, the very best, the ones who go on to become professional soccer players or tennis players, that they played multi-sports growing up. All the top athletes say this. We have an epidemic of overuse injuries because kids are playing one sport. I think the definition of specialization is at least 8 months a year in a single sport with few breaks.
Yeah.
And it's just not in kids' best interest. And I really sympathize with parents who are trying to figure this out, because it is true that the 8-year-old who's playing baseball year round or basketball or lacrosse or in soccer is going to be better in soccer than the 8-year-old who's playing one season at when they're 8 years old.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's okay. That's the reality. But I think as a parent, you really have to think a little more long-term than that.
Yeah.
And where is that 8-year-old who's playing soccer 12 months a year going to be when he's 14 or 15? Versus your 8-year-old who, with any luck, is able to play multi-sports. When he is 14 or 15, he's going to be in a much better position to handle different sports and probably to play soccer better. This is the other thing. I don't know if I mentioned this to you, Todd, that I'm involved in, I know I mentioned that I'm involved in a documentary project on collegiate women athletes and mental health. And one of the people we interviewed was Abby Wambach. And she said, and she might have said it in other, I think she said this elsewhere, but that she said that when she was growing up playing soccer, she also played basketball, and that she so looked forward to basketball because it was a break from soccer. And she got tired of soccer playing all the time. So basketball was a break, and she learned how to head the ball playing basketball because she learned how to jump.
Yeah, her timing.
And she also said that she said, if I were growing up now through it, I never would have made it, because it was just it's too intense. It's makes you too one-dimensional. And think of kids like high school kids. It's just, I mean, well, high school kids, forget it. If you're a middle school kid and you're playing one sport all the time, then it's just way too narrow.
Yeah.
And it is not in kids' interest. I also don't really think it's in families' interest, because it's just sucks all the life out of your family. Even if it's fun, I'm sure it's fun to go to some of the stuff. I always enjoyed that. I get it. But when you have more than one child, how do you manage that? Because you can be sure that like in our case, we had one who was a good athlete and two who weren't interested.
Yeah.
we had many more resources devoted to the one, and kids notice that.
Yeah.
And there's that's the nature of being a sibling.
Yeah.
So it's very fraught, and I think it should be avoided. This especially early specialization. Elementary school kids, there's just no one should be doing. No parent should feel they have to do that, because it's just wrong.
Well, and look, one of the things I've said this to you before, I say we because I'm on Team Linda, we have got to find a way to amplify that message. And it's funny you bring up Abby Wambach, and I want to give a shout out because you were on a podcast where I actually heard that was hosted by Abby and her partner Glennon Doyle, called "We Can Do Hard Things." And for parents that are listening, I would highly, highly recommend you listen to this interview with Linda, because there were a few things that were amazing to me. One was what Linda just pointed out about Abby's story about basketball and getting her timing from basketball, not from being taught how to head the ball in soccer. She got her timing in basketball to become one of the greatest headers in soccer, female soccer history. The other thing that was fascinating by them was just their lack of confusion and frustration over being in the whole system with a daughter and who's gone on now to play Division I. But I wanted to point that out because it was a podcast you were on, and it's a fantastic podcast that parents should absolutely listen to. To your point, my kids were both really, really athletic, and I don't think I'm a biased dad, but maybe I am. But they were both really athletic. One thing I can tell you is, as a former baseball guy, they could definitely play softball. They could throw, they could catch, they can hit. They didn't want anything to do with that sport, but they were athletic. And again, we just didn't. They found their sport. My oldest was volleyball, and thank God, eventually found beach volleyball, where that was just a great transition for her. And then the other one was soccer, and it was like, did they ever really develop all of those skill sets that were inside of them that could have been fun, that really could have brought moments to them? I'm not convinced that soccer was my youngest best sport. If she had played other things, she might have found that, the more love came from maybe playing basketball. She said, by the way, she said on the podcast, I said, if you didn't play soccer, what would you play? I think she said dance. I said, oh, that's cool. So, maybe it was that. And it just, the course just takes you in different ways. Let's transition, because we're about 3/4 of the way through, which is amazing. I want to talk more about mental health. I mean, it's dear to my heart. It's something I told you I definitely experienced with my younger daughter. Talk about the emotional shifts that we're seeing. Is there enough research out there that we're seeing that youth sports is developing, mental health outcomes that are just not healthy? And what's going on?
Well, there have been a few points, research, bits of research I can share. One is something that came out in actually 2015. So this is, I think we can all agree that kids' mental health was better in 2015 than it is now, mainly because of phones and COVID and all of that. There were phones in 2015, by the way. But this was a research paper done by the National Athletic Trainers Association that, this group convened to talk about mental health among high school athletes. So not necessarily young kids, but high school athletes. And they found that they were alarmed by the greater stress and strain on them, including sleep problems, anger, depression, irritability, that this had gotten worse. There was a consensus statement among this group of athletic trainers, a national group. So that struck me that, and we don't know exactly why, but that certainly this youth sports environment was prevalent then. I also have heard through other sports psychologists, one who said it is the professional consensus that high school athletes are more anxious and, worried now. And at the collegiate level, particularly girls, and I told you I'm working on this documentary project.
I can't wait to see.
And we found that, there's one really good bit of data coming out of the NCAA that it was a wellness survey of about 23,000 athletes, a really big survey. And it had men and women respond to a variety of questions. And one set of questions, there were 10, ask the athletes, if they felt, most days like extremely overwhelmed, anxious, angry, depressed, sleep deprived, like it was 10 different metrics. And the women scored worse on every single one. And in some cases, dramatically worse. The one that was the most pronounced was felt overwhelmed. And 44% of the women athletes said they felt overwhelmed, and it was 17% of the men. So there's something going on with the women athletes in our experience that, and I don't want to be sexist about it or suggest that they're not capable of keeping up, because we all know that women are doing really well vis-a-vis men writ large in academics, certainly academics, professionally. This is the big crisis now is boys. So it's not that the girls and young women can't keep up, but they are just not having as much fun, it would seem, playing college sports as their male counterparts. But that's, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. That's college. But there's no question that there is a mental health crisis in the country. I mean, the former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy said it was the defining health crisis of our time. And part of this is, that CDC study that came out a couple of years ago that looked at this among high school kids, large cohorts. So it was pretty decisive that there was over the 10-year period from 2011 to 2021, 42% of high school kids felt sad and hopeless. And it had been the number in 2011, it was 22%. It was 28%. 28% versus 42%. And then have you seriously considered suicide? 22% of high school kids said yes. It was quite a lot lower. I don't remember what the number was, but it was a lot. All the mental health metrics were much worse in 2021 versus 2011. And of course, we don't know exactly why. I mean, Jonathan Haidt from NYU would say it's mostly phones, because kids are so, we all know about phones and how they, make you crazy and self-absorbed, and all these young men with their online lives, which is so disturbing, which we're reading more about lately. There's Peter Gray, who's an advocate of free play, and Lenore Skenazy, who's the founder of Let Grow and Free Range Kids. They argue that it's related to the shrinking of free play, the shrinking of kids having independent lives of their own without their parents, looking over their shoulder. And that corresponds with the phones, if you're stuck in the house because your mom won't let you walk down the street, without you being monitored.
Yeah.
Then you're going to go on your phone. So it's all of these factors, and there's a lot of anxiety about the economy and pressure, and parents feeling this need to keep up, this comparison culture. I mean, Vivek Murthy also put out an advisory statement last August, a year ago, cautioning about parents' mental health, because had even worse mental health than the college girls I was talking about, that they're so stressed out and overwhelmed, and they're worried about their kids. How are the kids ever going to make it? They're worried about their kids' mental health. How's that for a nice circle?
Well, that was, by the way, that was our path. We were almost consistently worried about one of our kids' mental health.
Yeah.
I mean, consistently.
It's very worrisome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Understandably, it's very worrisome. If you think there's a problem, I mean, you can freak out about it. Understandably, so he is drawing attention to, like, look, parents, we need to figure something out here, but we're doing things wrong. And his advice, which I loved, was, kind of take your foot off the gas. In other words, like, ratchet it down.
Yeah.
And this is what I love. And I think I really wish more parents would feel like free to do that you don't have to do this idiotic stuff all the time, all the organized stuff, all the, stuff that pulls you away from your home when you just want to sleep, when your kids just want to play with Legos, when they just want to hang out with the dog. And that it's not something that is apparently resume building, because, you're not earning something and getting a star in something or advancing to the higher team. But like, that's what, many, experts in child development would say is missing, that kids need this time where they're not being examined and analyzed and evaluated and instructed, but are just kind of allowed to be.
Yeah.
Without technology in their hands.
Yeah, and social media has definitely created. I mean, in watching that in both girls, it saw it more in soccer because I think the pressure that was created by the organization and or the coach or coaches, I think there was more of it to go to a D1 school as the level of what is success, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so subsequently what happens, it gets into that washing machine, and now the peer group is communicating and talking about, oh, well, today I talked to fill in the blank, right? Oh, today I'm committing to fill in the blank, and I'm happy to say, by the way, I see this exact trend with students on the college level where they're announcing an internship on LinkedIn, they're announcing a job, and I can see the stress on the other kids who don't have that job yet. And I get really, I admittedly turn up the volume in class and say, listen, your path is your path. It's not the next kid that's sitting next to you. Your path is your path. They're all different. So I don't want to hear anything about, and I don't want you to stress about what, Bobby or Jenny are doing and where they're going, because your time will come. You are all here and you're doing what you need to do to move forward. Your time will come. And they completely stress about the whole thing, and the mental anguish that it creates is unbelievable. The other thing I wanted to say is the data that you were providing, female to male, I think it's fairly accurate, because as I talk to these students, I've been doing it now for 7 years in my class, when I bring up youth sports, it's generally, I would say it's a little heavier, probably on both male, female, but it is definitely in those ratios where those kids are talking up about the effect of playing sports and the mental health outcomes that they had from playing sports when they were pre-college. And it's so heartbreaking. It's just heartbreaking.
Well, and what's especially unfortunate or just so regrettable is that exercise and being on a team and, being with like-minded, with peers your age and who like the same activity and like playing together can be so great. Can be so great for your mental health.
Yeah.
There's so many like protective factors, they call them, with being on a team. You're around your peers, you're exercising. You have, especially at the collegiate level, there's all these support systems built in.
Yeah.
But there's so many reasons why it ought to be great, all around great. And yet, we've just made it too serious.
Yeah.
It's just too serious.
Yeah.
And it's not great. And it just adds to the stress that kids have.
Yeah.
And to your social media point, I would like to, maybe we could encourage parents to take the pledge to not post pictures of their child, winning the such and such, or, just hit a 400, batting average, or whatever the, accomplishment is, to like, just take a vow. Don't post it. It's great. Be proud, all that, be happy for them.
Yeah.
But keep it to yourself. It's just making the world worse, for everybody else, just makes them feel bad.
Yeah.
And your child knows you're proud. You don't need to post it. Maybe that's just too old fashioned.
I'm going to regret bringing this up because we're getting short on time, but I do want to, there was one thing you wrote about in your book, and it struck such a chord with me. And you were talking about, I think when you played and having your name in the paper, you got an old photo, or you were talking about, I think you were talking about having your name in the paper, or your team and everybody. And I remember the days when I was playing AYSO, rec soccer, in the community that I was in California. I would always get the paper on Saturday because there was a youth writer, and if you had a good game, there was a chance you were going to get your name in the paper. Now, there's so much good about that, right? There's so much good about that achievement, and for any athlete to be able to move forward, now magnify it in a social media world, and it's totally different. It's totally different in today's world, and does not get the same effect that it should, or at least not from the right sources, at least from
I wonder, like, why do you think that's different?
I think it's
Yeah.
because I think the parents, as you just said, can amplify the message. They can
Yeah.
create the message. Maybe the coach creates the message. This was, as a journalist, it's a journalist making a decision in a
Yeah.
publication, making a decision to print your name or put a photo of you in the
Yes.
paper. In this
Yeah.
case, now you can take control and you can go post that, and it's
Yeah.
out of control,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, that's true. It was really thrilling to be in the paper
Oh, it
like
was
that.
so thrilling. Okay, before we close mental health, and we'd probably do a whole show on this, I did want to bring up to you loss of identity and your thoughts and in
Yeah.
everything that you've been around. Because I
Mhm.
experienced this when soccer ended. It was like I was not prepared. I was not prepared. I had no idea this was a real thing. Michael Phelps has talked about it with Olympic
Yeah.
athletes. He really needs to broaden it, because when you put kids through the intensity that they're going through in a competitive environment, identity loss is real on that level. And talk a little bit about what you've
Yeah.
seen.
Well, yeah, in the book, I profile this young woman who I call Isabella, who was this fantastic lacrosse player in the area, New Jersey. And she, had played it growing up forever, and she became a big star. Like, she was a very big star locally and in the state. And her junior year, no, it was between her sophomore and junior year of high school, she tore her ACL. And then, I've never torn my ACL, but I understand that it's pretty awful, and the rehab is long. It's a long time. I know she made it back by her junior year, the kind of the end of the season of her junior year, but it was, that's like 10 months, a long, long
Yeah.
time. And she said she was just crushed. She crushed, depressed. She didn't know who she was. She's like, if I'm not a lacrosse player, who am I? She was separated from her friends because while they were practicing, she was doing rehab. She was getting PT. This is, increasing is going to be more of an issue. The more we press young kids, children, to focus on one sport. I mean, first of all, they're more apt to get hurt because they're playing one
Yeah.
sport. And second, it's going to be more devastating because this is who they are. This is what they do. If this is what you do all the time and suddenly you can't do it, then who are you? And the advice I've read from so many various psychologist types, Brad Stolberg, he's not a psychologist, he's written about a lot of this. He's like, you want to have a house with many rooms. I think that's the term he used. That you don't want to have it's like don't have all your eggs in one basket. Like, you want to have multiple places you can go in your life, multiple sources of identity, so that if one of them is ripped away from you by an injury, or because you're retiring, you're just done, you're done with college soccer or whatever sport, then you have other places you can go. And this is, you can, resume your interest in painting, or you can get back to reading and join a book club, or you can work with animals like you've always wanted to. Like, there are other ways of identifying who you are, so that you're not so narrow. And that's one of the real downsides to the early sports specialization, because it's shrinking their world even more.
Yeah.
The younger and younger they get, and where you're saying, oh no, this is all you can do, then the impact when that is taken away from them, either by injury or to retirement, is going to be severe. And it just stands to reason. And we've seen that, like you said, Michael Phelps has spoken about it, his depression after the Olympic
Yeah.
Games ended. And you don't have to be Michael Phelps to be extremely depressed when your identity is taken away from you.
Yeah,
It's just
absolutely.
all the more reason to develop multiple sources, have multiple things that matter to you that you can turn to. So, it's not the end of the world when, you get hurt.
Yeah.
And it's gonna hurt anyway, because if it's important to you and you've been putting a lot of time into it, it's really gonna stink.
Yeah.
But it's you have other things you can do and fall back on, you'd be much better off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Linda, I can't believe I'm saying this to you, but we are over an hour, and I didn't even get to how do we fix this mess. So you got to promise me we can do another episode and talk about how we can fix
Sure.
this, which we can probably do an hour on, and we can talk a little bit about mental health and continue that. So with that, I'm going to take you to our rapid fire and give me your quick thoughts on each of these. You ready?
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
Best sports memory with your kids.
Hmm, that's a tough one. Oh, I know. Playing dodgeball in the front yard. It was not like I used to go out there and play dodgeball with them all the time.
Oh,
It
that's
was
awesome.
not the thing to do. You weren't supposed to,
Yeah,
Dodgeball was not appropriate, but we used to play and we had a lot of fun.
that's cool. I hope you were winning those games.
I did. I took it seriously.
All right. Toughest moment as a parent. What did you learn? Sports parent.
Sports parent.
We can come back.
Well, I can say I thought about this some because I saw, I had some idea what you might be asking. And I would say the worst sports moment was when my son was playing on an AAU basketball team. Like his junior year of high school, he finally joined one after the season ended. And he was on it for about a month. We were at this game in like Scranton, PA. No, he didn't know that he knew one of the coaches. He didn't know the other people on the team. It was like this random assortment of people thrown together on the gym 90 minutes from home. I'm like, and I just had this like epiphany, like, what the hell are we doing here?
Yeah.
And he felt the same way. So it was very instructive because it was like, okay, well, now let's get back to our values. This is not important to us.
Yeah.
We're not doing this anymore.
Oh, okay. Red flag in a youth sports program. Parents should be aware of.
Boy. Well, I would say if the coach and the ethos of the team it's all about there's brag, or the main thing is how many kids they get to play at D1 college or whatever, that's their focus.
Okay.
Look at all these young people we had go play at
they're selling the
Division I
dream.
programs. Yeah, it's like,
yeah,
that's when you say, I have other questions to ask. Is it okay to miss for a grandmother's birthday? How much time,
Yeah. Okay. Best age to even think about specialization.
Okay, I want to caveat it by saying that every child is different. And, if you're David Beckham, you can play soccer and you're not gonna, you're gonna make a living of it and be one of the best players in the world.
Yeah.
Or Tiger Woods playing golf. But for most kids, the research says and this is Neera Jayanthi I'm quoting, who's like the guru on sports specialization, is after kids go through their growth spurt, or like the beginning of puberty. So that's like 10, 11, 12.
Okay.
Should be the earliest.
Okay.
And later is better. If you can swing it, one message is delay as long as possible.
Yeah.
Delay specialization.
All right. What matters most? Coach, culture, or competition?
Culture, I think.
Okay.
Because that includes the coach. The coach sets the terms of the culture. So I would say culture, absolutely.
Okay. One word to describe the future you want for youth sports.
One word. Reformed.
Okay. And then finally, which I ask everybody, what does it mean to you to be valiant?
To be valiant?
To be valiant.
It would be to face fears, to acknowledge the human reality of being afraid of things at times and doing it anyway.
Yeah.
That to me is what's being valiant. In whatever setting you're talking about, it's confronting your fears.
Okay, awesome. I love that. Well, we did it, Linda. We did it. I want to first say, before I give you final thoughts, if you enjoyed this conversation, please go out and get this book. This book is available at all bookstores, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, so on and so forth. You can get digital copies on Audible, on Amazon, and you can also get it at lindaflanaganauthor.com. So any final thoughts before we go, Linda?
Oh, my last thought. Yeah, you said there was one bit of advice for parents, if you would, and I've saved it for the last, and that is, the whole world is conspiring to make you think this is more important than it is. Youth sports, it's not that important.
Yeah.
I mean, they're nice, they can be great, they can be educational and all of that. They can be great. But in the scheme of your life and your children's life, they're not as important as you've been led to believe.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can't thank you enough. I hope we do this again soon, especially since we didn't get to one important segment. But I thank you so much for joining me. And
it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Todd.
Oh, you are absolutely welcome. And I look forward to leading these conversations having more of them with you and joining Team Flanagan to fight this battle. So just remember me all the time when you're thinking about who am I going to put on my team. I'm always willing. I'm always willing. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right. So in close, if you found value in this conversation, share it with another parent, an athlete, or even a coach. For more stories like Linda's, as well as other resources, visit playfearless.org. And like I always like to say, for all the parents that are in the thick of it or just starting out, remember, you're allowed to make bold, informed decisions for your child. You're allowed to walk away from the wrong team. You're allowed to demand a better culture. But most of all, you're allowed to trust your gut and lead your family the way that's right for you and especially your kids. Until next time, be valiant, play fearless.